I can't let a session go by without referring to provincial, federal responsibilities. That would just be wrong. Jamie, as you know, agriculture is beloved by constitutional lawyers for its oddity as a joint area of responsibility between the federal and provincial governments. And interestingly, you talked about environment and climate change Canada and emissions issues there, but you didn't mention agriculture and agri-food, I guess, Canada. Do they have a sort of supporting role in all this? My guess is they don't have direct regulatory involvement, more supporting, but I guess I'm just unclear in terms of whether or not they are even looking at this issue.
Do I have volume? It sounds like I do, yes. Agriculture and Agri-Foods Canada has taken a number of initiatives, which I think, Owen, I would agree with you, fall into the support category. If we are talking about the challenge of moving an awareness of greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture down to the level of actual farm operations, then people engaged in growing different crops or raising different forms of livestock become interested in what does that mean for me. And at the federal level, Agriculture and Agri-Foods Canada has been a key promoter and key partner in developing and distributing access to a program called HOLOS, H-O-L-O-S, which would allow an individual farmer to go online, identify the crop or the livestock activity that his or her farm is involved in, describe soils, describe some climate conditions, describe existing machinery and operations, and ask for a kind of farm-level analysis of what would my greenhouse gas emissions be if I shifted a little this way, or if I shifted a little that way, if I acquired a new piece of equipment or machinery or something of that kind. So there's a huge potential applicability here of federal government science and learning being shared with people in the industry. So that's a kind of a concrete example of one of the things that's going on.
J'ai une question. Donc, merci beaucoup tous les deux pour vos présentations qui étaient très intéressantes. J'aurais une question pour Malek. Dans le domaine des biocarburants, vous avez mentionné que c'était... Enfin, il semble que du côté des technologies, c'est plutôt en réduisant les émissions, en utilisant donc des biocarburants. Quels sont les... je connais assez peu le domaine, là, mais au niveau des technologies qui sont employées pour produire les biocarburants, est-ce que vous réfléchissez à cet aspect-là des choses aussi dans votre projet, le Garden, ou qu'est-ce qui est utilisé surtout, vers quoi on s'en va? Est-ce que c'est... parce qu'on sait que c'est quand même un enjeu au niveau de l'utilisation des sols. Donc, quelle culture favorisez-vous? Est-ce qu'il y a des développements, par exemple, du côté je sais pas, des algues, utiliser des algues? Ou je sais qu'il y a des... sur le plan là, de la fabrication des biocarburants, il y a quand même des questions qui se posent.
Est-ce que vous parlez pour le Canada ou l'international?
Les deux, en fait.
L'international, en fait, il y a Altair, qui est le seul producteur qui est en Californie, pour l'Amérique du Nord. La Finlande en produit également. On a une entreprise de Gatineau, qui est un des des leaders justement dans la production, mais cette production se fait convertir aux États-Unis justement. Au Canada, on n'a pas encore les infrastructures pour développer cette industrie. Et d'ailleurs, pour la petite parenthèse, Garden vient de collaborer avec Ressources naturelles Canada dans le cadre du défi Visée Eau, dont le but est justement de promouvoir la production des biocarburants au Canada. On peut les faire de plusieurs méthodes possibles. Ça peut être de l'agriculture, la moutarde, en faisant produire la moutarde, les déchets municipaux, les huiles usées des restaurants, de la restauration et des industries. Les algues, bien sûr, c'est le moyen le plus intéressant. Cependant, on n'a encore aucune industrie ou aucun investissement considérable au Canada qui va permettre de produire une quantité suffisamment intéressante pour qu'un industriel de l'aérospatial soit intéressé. Et c'est justement le but du défi avec Ressources naturelles Canada, c'est de développer cela, sauf que la réglementation à côté est floue et les investisseurs ne peuvent pas se lancer dans quelque chose qui n'est pas clair pour eux. Donc, le moyen le plus intéressant actuellement, c'est de passer par ce qu'on appelle des off-take agreements, donc qui se mettent d'accord. Moi, je vais produire telle quantité, toi, tu vas m'acheter telle quantité. Mais ça n'a pas encore été fait au Canada. On l'a vu de par le monde, dans les pays scandinaves, aux États-Unis, mais pas au Canada. Et c'est justement ce qu'on essaye de démarrer. Et on trouve ça dommage parce que un des éléments importants pour le Canada aussi, c'est les ressources forestières. Les résidus forestiers ne sont pas collectés, ne servent à rien d'autre, mais ils pourraient être très utiles à produire du biocarburant alternatif. Et c'est une des démarches possibles, justement, et on a fait une présentation à l'industrie forestière en leur montrant que, justement, il y a des débouchés intéressants, sachant qu'eux, ils ont des problèmes à trouver des débouchés ces derniers temps, parce que le papier est en train de disparaître.
Oui. Non, ben, en fait, il y a des PME qui commencent dans ce domaine-là particulièrement, l'utilisation des résidus forestiers.
Tout à fait.
Il y en a, donc ici, j'en connais, mais effectivement,
mais
il y a quand même des gros enjeux.
Un volume suffisamment intéressant.
Oui, c'est ça. C'est plutôt expérimental.
C'est ça. Et actuellement, le prix est 2 à 3 fois plus cher. Donc, si j'étais Air Canada, je ne me lancerais pas dans quelque chose qui va me coûter beaucoup plus cher, sachant que j'ai déjà du mal à faire de l'argent.
Oui. OK. Merci.
I have a couple of questions for Malik as well. The first is, and it's been a very long time since I took a course in air and space law, but I did years and years ago. And I remember very little of it other than the Chicago Convention and the flag state rule. And I guess my first question was, and I may have missed it in your presentation, I'm assuming as a practical matter, the way you govern emissions from foreign airlines is that you trust the flag state to do it. Is that a fair assumption? Or
for the international regulation point of view?
As a practical matter, does Canada, for example, try and regulate emissions from foreign airlines that come into Canada, or is that regarded as something that the home state, the flag state, would actually regulate?
So each state has jurisdiction on his own country.
Right.
Now, for international aviation, it's ICAO that is the regulator. And ICAO is planning to actually tax international flights if the country from which the flight is departing and the country for which the flight is going are both into the CORSIA framework.
Okay.
If they are both inside, it's considered. If they are not both part of the CORSIA scheme, it's not considered.
Okay. But as a practical matter, though, in terms of inspecting aircraft and so forth, does Canada take much of a role with respect to, say, United Airlines, or do they say that the Americans are basically taking care of that? in terms of emissions and,
That's done with ICAO directly. They certify everything
Yeah.
from the beginning, so they don't really need to check it out.
okay, okay. The second question I had is a lot of the improvements and certainly technology seem to be obviously driven by commercial considerations. You know, it's just more profitable to run an airliner that weighs less and so forth. And given the fact that the private sector is obviously a big player in all this, I was interested that you mentioned ICAO, but you didn't mention the private sector counterpart, which is IATA, and obviously also based in Montreal. Has IATA played any role at all in this? I know it has in some areas in terms of safety and so forth, because IATA, as you know, of course, is basically an association of international airlines. Have they played any role in the GHG reduction at all?
No, IATA is just taking care of international flights and routes. So they deal with the international cooperation and the rules of flying, but they don't deal with emissions and regulations regarding emissions. That's only ICAO's
Okay.
work.
So international airlines are not sort of cooperating between each other in this sort of area?
Not for now. What we see now in worldwide is some airlines, like United in the United States, like other airlines in the Scandinavian countries, it's their own initiatives. But they are trying to bet on the future, and they know we're going to get there anyway, and we have no choice. And they are playing on it right now. So the companies that are actually investing in biofuel are really seeing long-term, and they know exactly what is going to happen. We're going to have to replace kerosene with biofuel, sustainable biofuel.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not sustainable, we're not doing anything.
Yeah.
And that's really important.
Okay. Thank you.
For Jamie, quick question. You mentioned this possible or actual online tool, Holos. My question is it, and I didn't catch it when you mentioned it, is it active now or is it proposed?
It is active now. They've been easing into it, and it seems to be one of those systems that learns more the more data and information are fed into it. So it's growing and developing, but it's fully operational.
Is this a tool that is available to farmers outside of Canada?
I haven't used it. I simply came across it, and it seems to me that to the extent you've got access to the internet, you should be able to make contact with this system. I have no idea whether it's broader than Canada in terms of the crops that it is dealing with at the moment, or species or technology, but presuming you were operating a facility in Nebraska.
Which is what I'm thinking of. There's some farmers, sustainable farmers in Nebraska who would be, I think, very interested in
One
this.
would imagine enough overlap that if you put in the question that applies to your farm operation, Hollis should be able to offer information back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Jamie, there's been quite a bit written recently by legal scholars as well as scholars in other disciplines about the idea of an energy, water, food nexus. And the literature comes at this from different perspectives. But my question is Is there any indication that these connections are explicitly taken into account in the development and implementation of programs that you mentioned in your presentation?
I haven't seen anything at the regulatory stage, but if you work your way through some of the industry materials that have been developed for the guidance of producers, there will be clear linkages. For example, if you are in a position to take advantage of current technology, these GPS and monitoring systems, you can identify the immediate needs of your soil, either for irrigation or for an application of fertilizer. And if you are in a position to reduce fertilizer use or the operation of pumping facilities as part of an irrigation scheme, if you are dependent on that, then you are lowering the cost of food production, increasing your own revenue, and you get a less energy, less water, if not more food, equivalent food calculus that's offered to you if you make the appropriate choices. It's not actively pitched as an energy, water, food nexus. It's pitched as a commercial incentive to people on the ground.
Okay, thank you.